Hey guys, welcome to API testing. This is Shariful. In this lecture, we're going to learn some web technology like what is client, what is server, that will help us to understand what is API, how API works, as well as why we need to do the API testing or the importance of API testing. And then eventually we'll move on the API testing. Then let's go. So what is client? A client is a piece of computer hardware or software that accesses a service made available by a server as part of the client-server model of a computer network. The server is often, but not always, on another computer, in which case the client accesses the service by way of a network. So this is very high-level definition about a client. But if you think about a real life, simply a client is your end user computer. So end user computer or your mobile works as a client, where we send our request through a browser, and that request goes through the browser, through a HTTP protocol. There is a network, that's why it's called, there is a network. So through our internet is our network. Through the internet, it goes our request to a server, and the server responds as per our request, and we see the response in our browser. So the client is nothing, just end user computer, you can say browser, or your cell phone, mobile, those are all client. Okay, so that's the very easy way to understand what is client. Let's see now what is server now. So a server is a computer or system that provide resources, data, services, or programs to other computer. So other computer, it means like client computer, known as a client over the network. So in theory, whenever computers share resources with client machine, they are considered server. So there are many types of server, including web server, mail server, file server, and virtual server. So if you understand the client, you will easily understand the server. Server is nothing, it is where we store our data. So when a client send a request, example, if I go to website booking.com, in this website, if you want to book a hotel, so this is your client. This is, we're sending a request through a booking.com website, from our computer. So this is your client. So when you send, do some data like, where you want to book. So this is the Niagara Falls, your checking date, your, checkout date, your, adult people number, and then you will click on search. So you are giving your input, to search that you have a available, room on that day. So this is the, inquiry data you enter through your client computer, and it will, this data will pass to their corresponding server of the booking.com, their database, and then they will see this if their availability on the day or not. As per their output, it will show the output on your screen. So that the output or response will came from the database. So that database works as a, you can say over here, as a server. So you could have a different type of server. There is a, the web server. This is, example we have shown. This is a web server. There's a mail server. The mail server is to help us to, retrieve or to see that, to operate our mail services. There is a file server also, where you can, store your different type of files, like a picture, images, different type of the text file, all those things. It's stored on the, file server, and you can retrieve that server, file anytime, wherever you need. So this is called, this is all about a very high level, it's a server. So we need this kind of very basic understandable technology about the web, how it works, to understand. You will see that later on this concept will help you to understand about the API. Now let's move on. the web application, how the web application built, the architecture, very high level, the architecture design about a web application or web technology. So in modern technology, when a web is built, there's a three container or three layers involved with to build a web application. Here is a first layer, you can say presentation layer, which is nothing, is a client. It's a client. Now we know what is client. The client is like end user, the computer, your browser, right, your mobile, like through those devices we enter our request, we send our request, whatever you want to see, whatever you want to visit. So this is the one layer, it's called presentation layer. To build a web application, you must have a we must have a presentation layer. So this is a presentation layer. And then when you send our request through what? Through a network. What network? The internet network. The internet, it has a servicing protocol. So through this protocol we send our request to, there is another layer, it's called business or logic layer, business logic layer or business tier, or you can say middleware layer. So this middle tier or business logic tier will have the business logic about that corresponding application. Example over here, if I talk about again the booking.com. So when you enter our data, like your location Niagara Falls, and then your checking date, checkout date, you select your adult, you click on search. So this request will not directly hit the backend database. Before that, there is a middle tier or business logic, where for this company, for this booking.com, they have a business written. What is the business logic is written up there, like there is a function up there, so that our request data will fall as a parameter on that function, where it requires to get an output, to search an output, you need to enter, you need to have a location data, you need to have a checking data, you need to have a checkout data, you need to have a number of adults, all those parameter we need to fill up on the business logic tier. There is a method up there, it should have it, there is a method up there, so that all the data will be passed to that method, and that code will will execute and will send the request to the database. They are corresponding behind the scene, their database, where they have all the the data related about their availability. And they will see that if there is a availability that is specific, using that filter, like using the checking date, the checkout date, and also the also other parameters like number of people they can leave, they can stay, and also the location. And based on all the parameter from the database, there will be query response will come back to the business logic tier, and this business logic tier will send the response through the internet back to the client, and then we can see the output in their hotel.com. So this business logic tier is very, very important. It is the middle tier, so it has a function, a lot of function over here. So and that define this company's business, how the request goes. And because if you over here just select the location and the check-in date, but you don't put the checkout date, or you don't select the number of adult, if you click on search, you will see that it will not, your request will not send. It will give you the error message because of the business logic tier. That's the way they design the business logic tier, where there is a number of programs. There is a function up there, and to execute that function, the client computer need to pass the exact number of data that they need to execute on the business. So that's why business logic tier is very important. It defines the business, how their business will work, how their business will run. So all the business logic, it belongs to this business logic tier or middle tier. Okay, so this is called a web server. So there is a number of server in it's that located in business logic tier, which is a web server that hold the web applications business. There is an application server also. Okay, so there is a number of servers that belongs to this business logic tier. What is the bottom line? This layer hold the business logic. It's a program by the code that define how the business will run when a client they send a request through their presentation layer. And based on the business logic layer, after when this execution invoked, it goes to the database. There is a third layer, it's called the database layer, or you can say database management tier. So in this database management tier, as per the business logic, it will retrieve the data from this database layer, and then it will get the response from this query as per the query from the business logic tier, and it will come back to the business logic tier, and it will send that response through the internet to the client computer, same client computer or client machine. Okay, that's the three layer or container involved nowadays modern technology when they build an application. So when they build the application, first the DAP team, they build the database. This is they build the application as per the tier, reverse way. They build the database first, because they have to know all the database. It means all the data will store over here. So they need the place first, where the data will store. So they build this layer first, and then they build the logic. If they don't have the logic, how the client request will execute. So then secondly they build the middle tier of business logic, and then finally they build the UI tier, or you can say graphical user or the presentation tier. Okay, so that they can enter some input over here. It goes to the business logic tier, and it's filter as per the request comes through the business logic tier, and then business logic tier it's transfer that request to the database, and then from the database it gets the response and it comes to the presentation layer. So that's the way the modern technology, modern web applications built with at these three different layers. I hope that you understood that part. Okay, so if you understood this part, now you will see that how easy to understand the API or other stuff. So and also the API testing. So over here, it's just one more things before we move on to the API. So the database layer, over here we talk about the database layer. It is usually there is two types of database layer. One is the data service layer. It's transfer data from server to the presentation layer. As we know, this is the main job. That's what database layer it does. It transfer the data from the server to the presentation layer. It represents business logic from the client side and the server as a intermediary between the server and the presentation layer. And the data, in the database there is another layer. It's called inside the database. Inside the database, so its whole database is not only hold the data, but also it holds some authentications, right? Some access layer. So which belongs to the authentication, because some of the application you need a proper authentication, you need a proper username, password, so you are a valid client or not. So who's going to verify that? The logic will be over here, but the data will become over here. Say you are a valid username, valid user for a bank application. So when you pass your bank credential through your presentation layer, so the business logic will fulfill your data as per the business logic build. Like you need a valid username, valid password, it will filled over here, and then when they have you fill that parameter, it will transfer to the database, and in the database from the database it will find out that is there any existing client you have as per the input we have passed. Like the username is a valid username and the valid password, and it's supposed to be here. So if you are existing client, your username password should store on the database. It should found up there. So this is the authentication. So database server is not only store the data like about your application, but also it store the accessibility of a user. So that's what you said, like data access layer provide access to your data including binary and XML files. Okay, this layer perform data management operations such as create, read, update, delete. So this layer also performs some data management operations. Say example, you can enter some more data, you can remove some data, so that's kind of, so like if we have a example inventory, okay, your application inventory, so you have after you have access to your inventory database, you can remove some inventory from your database, from your application. You can enter, you can add some. When you receive some inventory, it will add to your database, right? So it will manipulate your database. So database access layer is involving not only the authorization, but also it has the involvement some data management operations such as create data, read data, update data, and delete data. Okay, so that's the overall idea. The web application, 3 different layers, and each and every layer's job and responsibilities. I hope that it's helped you to understand this basic concept of our web technology. So now let's move on API. So what is API? So API, it stands for application programming interface. This is the definition, very simple meaning of the API. It is the term stands for application programming interface. But do you understand anything by this meaning? API program, the application programming interface, it doesn't understand. If you don't know that, it is totally some just keyword, right? We don't understand what does it mean and how the API works. So to understand what does it mean, this application programming interface, we have to understand some of the problem. Let's talk about some of the problem so that we see that's like why we need API, and through finding this question's answer we'll understand what is API and also the meaning of this application programming interface. So to understand why we need API or what is API, let's have some real life example. Okay, here is the application. It's called Radisson. So this is a application for the Radisson Hotel. Okay, say this is application. So what's really happen when you enter some input? You select the destinations, right? So whatever your destination, say Niagara Falls, your check-in date, your checkout date, your occupancy, so how many people you want to stay, and then if you want to put more parameter like a special rate, so whatever it takes, and then you click on search, and then what's really happen, all of your input it goes from the front end. This is your client application. As per we have understood the web technology, how it works, it goes to the middle tier or your business logic, and the business logic goes to the database, and it's fetch the data as per our parameter, and its response back to our middle tier or business logic, and it comes to over here, right? So now, so here is a this application, the database, the middle tier, everything it's written in one same repository, because this is the same company. Radisson is the same company, so they have their own database, they have their middle tier, and also this front end design also in the same repository. But still, so why they need a middle tier now? The middle tier, as I said, is a middle tier. It belongs to, it has all the business logic. Front end, it's just the representation. Is in the presentation layer. It like how the application will be look. Like what would be the font size, the front color, what would be the background theme, how it's going to be look. All those things is the front end. Nothing else. It doesn't have the business logic. How you enter, when you enter your data, and then how this data will be narrowed down and will go to the database, how it's going to work, it all belongs to that logic. It belongs to, it's defined in the business logic tier. So that's why we need the business logic tier, and business logic tier is nothing, is the API. Okay, so that's one reason why we need the API. Even though there's this three layer. There are the 3 layer for the Radisson Hotel, like front end, middle tier, as well as the back end. It's written in the same repository, but still you need the API to define your business clearly. Okay, that's a number 1. And number 2, here is nowadays the modern technology. You have this every day, so we're moving to new technologies. So nowadays, like for the front end technology, there is tons of new front end technology comes to the market. It could be like your front end design could be based on now Angular, React, with the different technologies. It could be the different language, could be the TypeScript. Okay, so your front end nowadays, because Angular React comes with much more professional looks, nicer looks, much more dynamic views. It's bringing us a lot of different benefits to develop their application with all the front end new technology, which is the Angular React using the TypeScript. So that's what a lot of companies, most of the companies, they're all moving to the new technology. Makes more efficient, makes more lightweight, makes more better look of your front end. Okay, so this is a technology. It's a front end. It's a one type of technology. But let's go to but here is a problem one. So your front end is for the Radisson. They are using Angular modern technology using TypeScript. But for the back end, which is the middle tier, where we have all the business logic, usually most of the people, they use Java. So Java is been a long time stable the backing language too. Okay, so here they don't need to change the technology over here, because nobody see it. Is invisible, right? It's intangible, this technology. It is works behind the scene. So, and the Java is very stable. So their language, their business logic, it belongs using a different technology, which is Java. So now how this, when you send a request from the front end or client computer using a different technology, which is Angular TypeScript, how this technology, different technology, work with the Java. Because in Java, it's a Java, so in Java it has a business logic, and over here, say example, there is a method up there. It's called search reservation. So when you enter your destination, your location, your checking date, checkout date, all this input over here, and to make sure to search, is there any availability, to define this, to find out that availability, that's request parameter. It goes to the middle tier, and the middle tier assume that there is a method up there written in Java. It's called method name search reservation, where it will enter all of your parameter, your date, your location, checking date, out date, all those things over here. Then it means this search reservation method have to be execute when it's this method have to call through this your front end over here. So how this, but they are totally two different languages, two different technology. If both are same technology, it would work nicely. So Java can call Java method, but over here you can see the TypeScript cannot call any Java method, right? So but this method is the job to define, to search your availabilities. But how this method, if it doesn't execute, doesn't call, it will not execute. Then how these two different technology can work? It needs to work. And then from here, after it's execute, that's this method, the result, it will go to the database, and from the database, as per the request, it will fetch the data and it will come to over here. So the problem over here is the two different technology. And nowadays the modern application, most of the company, they are all moving on different updated technology. It could be the Angular, it could be the React using a TypeScript or JavaScript, right? And the backend mostly is the Java. So then the problem is, here is the two different technology, but they need to talk with each other. Here is the point, to resolve this kind of problem, API comes to the picture. So API is nothing. This is your middle tier. This middle tier is your API, where you have all of your the business logic belongs to there. And API, the API mostly it's written usually in two different format nowadays. It's mostly the JSON format or XML format. So JSON or XML format is a very universal format that can, it doesn't depend to any language. It can talk with any language. It could be the TypeScript, JavaScript, or whatever your technology, Angular, whatever it is. It is a very universal format. So if you don't know what is JSON or XML, so I have a very quick tutorial about the JSON, because since most of the API nowadays they use the JSON, so you can check below in description, go through that. You will have an overall idea, very high level idea about the JSON, and you will learn some of the stuffs regarding the JSON. So your business logic, this API is API usually written. So API is the top on your business logic, and API is like the middle, the middle person, you can say, middle tier between your client computer and your business logic. So business logic is still in a Java, but on the top there is an API over here. And API, since API written in JSON format or XML format, it can talk with your client computer, as well as it can talk with your business logic. So there is no problem, where whatever technology you use at the front end, and this parameter goes to the API, and the API, it's translate that information and pass to the business logic. And the business logic, since this API can easily talk with any language, so whatever is the front end or in the server layer. Okay, so it can, so that's the business logic. The API comes to the picture to solve this kind of problem. Okay, so this is the problem. It's between the same same company. Even though all of your front end, everything, it's built in the same repository. So here is another problem also. To resolve another problem in API comes to the picture. Let's say that another problem. So here is the booking.com. So through the booking.com, it's booking.com, hotels.com, that's kind of application can help you. You can book any hotel or your airline's ticket through this application for different destination, different hotel from different company. So you can book your hotel through the Radisson itself. You can book your hotel even through the booking.com. So if you pass your location over here, check in, check out information, right, and search that, click on search, it will show you if there is a room available based on your parameter requirement, for the Radisson Hotel in Niagara Falls from these applications, from this company. So how this, and this is very common, business nowadays, the people that develop, they use, like, they display the other company's data on their own site, own application, and they share the profit. Okay, so how this, so now how your data you are passing, your client computer is a booking.com, it's totally different client, different company, and how this different company, this data will place a request for the another company, which is the Radisson. So it's a Radisson, it has its own database. Let's go to over here. So number 2, the problem here. So here, you are sending a request through the booking.com, and the booking.com, they could have any technology. It's not necessary that they would have to match, so they could have any technology. It could be this, the Angular React, it could be the Angular React with the TypeScript or JavaScript, any technology over here. And then you are sending your request through the booking.com for who, to find your booking or search in Radisson. So Radisson is totally different organization, and your booking.com is totally different organization, but you are searching, you are looking for data from the Radisson database from over here to come over here. So how this works, but still you see that it's nowadays it's a very common technology, this is very common business partnership is working. So how this works is that a Radisson, they open their database for the booking.com or any other, like any other companies, they open their database so that they have a direct access and they can respond from there? No, this is not the ideal business, right? It is not the secure, it's not the safe. Nobody wants to expose their database to have the access to other different companies. But then how it works? Because ultimately booking.com, they're getting the response from the Radisson's database for their incline. To resolve this kind of problem, again API comes to the picture. Since now API it's the top on your middle tier, works as a middle tier, and booking.com, even though they need to talk with the business logic of the Radisson, but they talked with the Radisson business logic through the API. So since the API, again, it's based on the JSON or XML format, so their request goes to directly to the API through the API, and API can understand whatever the technology booking.com they are using. API can translate that, and it transferred to it's pushed to the Radisson, their business logic, whatever the their backend, maybe it's a Java same, and pass to the execute that same method, like a search reservation method, and it will execute, it will go back, this request will pass to the Radisson database, and then it will respond to the business logic tier or API, and then API will transfer in that request to the front end or booking.com. And all this request and response will transfer, will send and get back to the incline or front end client through the internet protocol, or it's called HTTP protocol. So internet, they have the protocol is called HTTP protocol, which is hypertext transfer protocol. So it has a two protocol. One is HTTP request protocol. So through the request protocol, it will send the request from the front end or from the client in, and when the response will come back from the database, and the API will send this response through the HTTP response protocol. So between the client, front end, and the API is only the the communication way. It's the HTTP or internet. Simply you can say internet, and through the internet it has the protocol, HTTP protocol, that can that help you to send your data and also receive the data from the API. So here is the bottom line. API is the person who received the data from the front end, and this front end could be their own repository, could be from their own repository like from the Radisson, or could be from the different repository like booking.com, hotels.com, any repository. They only talked with the API, and this API receives the data through the internet protocol, and similarly it's talked with the middle tier and the database and receive the response, and it's transferred to their incline. So this problem then it resolves, and that's why an API comes to the picture. So whether you have you need to talk to your front end and your database within the same repository, or you need to talk with the different front end and different backend with two different company, in two different repository, API comes to the picture. And that's why there's an API developer. Each and every company nowadays, they hire an API developer, they build the API, and they share this API to their own company, or to work their own front end, or even their business partner like booking.com, hotel.com. They share this API to this guy, and this guy just implement their API in their application, so that this API, their application can talk through the API. And that's the way it's now this kind of partnership business is working very well. So that's why you will see this, whether you go to the say booking.com or any other, so even you go to the Air Canada, right? You go to the Air Canada and you will see at the right side, it shows some of the advertisement for hotel, to book your hotel, right? The place you want to go, right? And those hotels comes from different company. It could be the again hotel.com, booking.com, or even Radisson, so different hotel, Sheraton. So how this all this ads is showing up there is through the API. Okay, so that's the way it works. And now you understood the API's importance, right, and how the API works. Now if we go back to the definition of the API, now it comes to over here. The term API stands for Application Programming Interface. Interface is the it works. The API is an application, so it is an applications. It's written in a program, in a programming language, okay, and it works as an interface, as a middle tier. So it is an application. It's representative of the application. So it's this. So here is the over here. It's your API example. This is your database. This is the front end client. So it could be anything. Your Mac machine, your cell phone, your Windows machine, whatever, any browser. Send your request. This is all our client, and you have a middle tier over here, business logic, and including a API. So and one of the famous, there's a number of different type of API you can find in nowadays. The web API is one of the very famous, as the mail API, web API. So web API over here, and then it sends the data to the database, right? Send the request to the database based on their business logic. So this API, what does it represent? It's represent your applications. So whatever your applications, it represent as your application. That's why it says application programming, and this API written in a programming language, through a code format, and it is an interface. It means it is work as a middle tier. Okay, the middle tier, it works because it belongs to it located in the middle tier. So that's why if you stands for the API, the meaning is application programming interface. If you, and then now you can see it really pretty good makes sense with the meaning, that what it does. Now we understand how it works. Now you can see the meaning of the application programming interface. So it is an interface or middleware that can be used to program software that interact with an existing applications. In practice, an API is a set of function and procedure. As I said, an API is nothing. It has a sets of programs. It written in a code, right? So which is the represent your business logic, right? So it is a set of program or procedure that allow you to access and build upon the data and functionality of an existing applications. So how your existing applications will works, all the functions logic belongs to the API, which is tied with the business logic. Clear, right? So this is the the meaning of the API, how it works. So nowadays you're talking about APIs were typically referred to web APIs. Mostly it's like when you use any applications through your browser, it has a tie with the web APIs, right? So here is some of the example, like when you log in through a website using Facebook. So Facebook, they use their own the login API. Okay, so also you can when you switch your to the Netflix, you see number of movies like it shows through their Netflix API. That job is to display all the movies as per they have availability, as well as your profile. Even or when you search a flight on Google and it shows number of response, so how all the response shows from hotel.com, bookings.com, Air Canada, all those things works with their API works with the Google. Okay, or when you want to place a Google map on your applications, right? So when you place a Google map, so example, if you go to the codeinbox.com, and if you go all the way, say contract, so you will see there is a map over here. So if you go to the Codeinbox, so any application, you will see there's maybe they have an address, and also there is a Google map over here in different applications. Right? How this map is displaying over here? Simply Google, they have an API. So you have to pass your address. Okay, you have to pass the parameter as your address, then it will give you the API, and you will just embed that API or that code to your applications. Then it will show the address over here, okay, on your applications, even though it's the different applications. Okay, so that's the way its API works, and or it talks with the two different technology, two different platform, two different applications. Okay, so that's the way you can say the API. Now we know that's API, how its API works. Now let's see this, that how, why we need the testing of API. We understood that the importance of API, because API is holding your business logic, right? API is holding your business logic. So here is your API, it's holding your business logic. So if we need to test this API, the reason, one of the big reason here, say example, you are searching a hotel through the booking.com. So you enter your parameter, like as it says, like the check-in date, checkout date, all those things, and it goes to the Radisson API with the business logic, and this business logic will receive your all the parameter will pass to the their backing data, your backing database, and it will get back to the response. So and who's getting the response first? Your API. This API getting the response is transferring over here onto the front end. So over here in the API, we need to test in this layer in the API to see the response. Is that really giving the right response or wrong? If this API receive a wrong response corresponding whatever the input you pass through the front end, then your front end will receive the wrong response, which is really bad. This is not the way the business works, right? So you want to make sure your API receiving the right response. That's why we need to test on the API layer. And also, other hand, you need to also confirm when you are sending a data input from the front end, and who's receiving, the first person is receiving your API. So you have to confirm the request you are sending to the API receiving the right parameter, right message, right request. It could, if between the time when it's transferred from over here through the HTTP protocol to the API, and API received the wrong request, then definitely your response would be the wrong. So in your API layer, it's very important to confirm that you're receiving the right request as well as we're responding, getting the right response. To ensure that, we need to test in API layer. We need to test in API, which is intangible. You cannot see that API, right? So it is the backend works, right? So to test an API, that's why we needed some sort of tool that can talk directly with the API, or called API endpoint. API will have its own URL or endpoint. There is a number of tools in the market, so especially the Postman is one of the very famous. Through this Postman, you can call to API endpoint, to sending your data, sending your request, as well as to see the response on your API. So that's why Postman comes to the picture. It's a very famous nowadays, very important. It plays very important role for the API testing, okay, to ensure that, and to receive, to sending data and receiving data, they use some API or HTTP method. There was a you'll see there's the number of methods. We'll explain on our next lecture that what type of method is involved, or API method involved, to receive and to define your response. But here is the importance to understand that if your API receive wrong or response wrong data, your front end will receive the will have the messed up. It will have the it will display the wrong data, which is not good for the business. That's why but still we need to do some testing on the front end to ensure. So if you're, since when the developer they develop an application, as I said, they build the database first, and then they build the middle business logic, and then they build the front end. So front end comes to the very end. So there is a tons of time between this, the business logic tier and the front end tier. So since business logic tier is built before the front end, tester, they can write the test cases for the API testing to ensure that the business logic is working as per expected. So that time, they can, so since front end is missing, so that time they use the Postman tool to send the, that Postman tool works as a front end, to send the request to the business logic and see how it responds. Okay, that's why Postman also comes to the picture. So if your API, testing, it's working fine, so nowadays then you can have a less testing even in front end. So it's API testing also saves some time on your front end. Still your front end, you want to make sure that your UI look is good, your text format is good for the UI, as well as you can do some functionality testing, like critical functionality testing, not probably all of them, but critical functionality, to see that you see the response on your front end as you expected it. We have to still do definitely some front end testing, but you can reduce some of your front end testing if your API testing is very good. You have a good number of API testing and it's working very nice, very good, because this is the logic is defining. So and API, whatever API you will receive, you can assume that 99% that always the same response will display to your front end. Okay, so that's why it's API testing comes to the picture, and it's very important. Let's say that's some very high level, what is API testing. Now API testing is a software testing type that validates application programming interface. The purpose of API testing is to check the functionality, reliability, performance, and security of the programming interface. In API testing, instead of using standard user input or output through the keyboard, or through the front end, you can use software to send calls to the API. Software is nothing, it's like we'll say nowadays Postman, to get output and note down the system's response. API tests are very different than UI testing and concentrate on the look and feel how your applications, right? It mainly concentrate to the business logic layer of the software architecture. So that's the overall high level about what is API testing, or why we need to do the API testing. I hope that it makes sense and it's help you to understand overall what is API, why is API necessary nowadays, and why we need to do the API testing. Okay, so that's all for today. Please stay tuned, there's a lot more to learn, there's a lot of more lecture will come. It will cover in between API testing using Postman. And please, if you like this tutorial, please share, subscribe with others. Have a good one. Thank you. Bye bye.